right.
I hit my mic as I went to crack it open. Hey,
It happens.
hi everybody.
Welcome to a very happy Halloween special episode.
Mm-hmm.
We've been on this every other week schedule, and we generally do 2 months, but October is special because you get 3 spooky episodes in the same month.
Yeah. Nice little end the season off. I kind of feel a proper way with what we're talking about today. I feel like this is a special one. But before we get into it, Jake, what are you drinking?
Oh, good. Thank you. Well, I've been very busy, as I know you have also been very busy, but I planned on getting out of the house and actually finding a beer. I have to admit, I made absolutely no effort to find a beer, so this is just what was in my fridge at the moment, but I'm going to still try to make it work.
All right.
So today we're talking about the legendary John Carpenter, and just like how he is a one-of-a-kind filmmaker, I would say that he comes around, or filmmakers like him come around once in a blue moon. That happens to be the only kind of beer I have. Blue Moon Belgian White from, the Blue Moon Beverage Company. Coors, I think, makes it. So, yeah, it's obviously just a fine little beer.
My favorite part about that, Jake, was you trying to sound witty. Once in a blue moon.
Make it sound like I meant to do that.
Yeah. Well, I had a beer planned for this episode, but I think I drank it on one of our previous ones by accident.
Okay.
Or I just drank it watching
in real life
movie. I opened the fridge tonight and was like, where the fuck is my beer? It was a great one. It had it was like The Man or something like that. Big old bearded dude, just badassery all around. Yeah, I drank it.
Yeah.
So luckily I had another beer. Now this one doesn't quite fit with Mr. Carpenter per se, but since this is the last episode of the spooky season for us, I figured a nice little cheers to the month itself is due. So I'm drinking just a nice classic Oktoberfest from McKinney Brewery, or McKinney, Texas. It's Tups Brewery. They make some good beer. If you come across it, I would recommend Tups.
Okay. Yeah. Never heard of Tups, but that sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, speaking of Oktoberfest and October things, I mentioned this is our 3rd episode this year, but that's not actually totally true because we have several other episodes.
There's some bonus shit out there, guys.
Yeah, if you follow us on Instagram, I've been calling it Bonus Boners Weekend, or week, I guess, because if you're listening to this now, all of it's available, everything I said before that we would be being guests on. We were invited to be a guest of the Film versus Film podcast. We did our episode with Killers of the Flower Moon coming out recently. We did a whole episode putting our Martin Scorsese movie up against his, and he chose Taxi Driver and we chose The Departed, and that was a very fun time.
That was a blast.
So if you like those kind of movies, check out Film versus Film podcast. He breaks his episodes into 2 parts. So there's a part 1, which is Taxi Driver, and a part 2, which is The Departed. I won't spoil who won, but we feel pretty good about it. And then if you've seen The Creator, which came out recently, he also asked us to do a little mini episode spoiling The Creator. And so we got into deep spoilers on The Creator. If there's another separate episode out there about that as well from the Film versus Film podcast. And then finally, we did just in time for spooky season as well. Finally, we're able to be on the Bee Critics podcast, and we were honorary Bee Critics for a day and got to talk about The Final Girls, which is an underrated gem of a Halloween movie. A lot of fun. We had a lot of fun with them. So check out the Bee Critics podcast with us on there.
Yeah. Film versus Film with Martin was awesome. So hello, Martin. Thank you for having us, man. And the Bee Critics, those two are just hilarious to talk to.
Yeah, Liz and Cord are great.
Yeah, it was pretty great. They actually apparently watched one of our recommendations and loved it. So that makes me happy, as everyone else in the world should go watch Ready or Not, because it's amazing. Yeah, The Final Girls was fantastic. That whole conversation that we had with them, breaking that movie down, and just everything we ended up talking about. I think two gems that really came out of that conversation was, how do you actually pronounce Adam Devine? Let us know how you pronounce it.
Yeah.
And then, who would survive a horror film? I've been kind of beating myself up over this one.
Yeah, I would like to hope and think that I could, but we all know it's probably not true.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I get too cocky and I would die a horrible, horrible early death. So
yeah, you'd be the first girl for sure.
But
so yeah, check out all those if you are all caught up on normal episodes. You have some extra bonus episodes out there to find. And then next episode, we are getting serious as we talk about Requiem for a Dream.
Yes.
One of Dustin's all-time favorite movies that I've never seen. It should be very interesting. and then to recover from that, which I am told we will need to do, all of the rest of the episodes of the year are very fun and nostalgic and
happy and silly. And yeah. I am very excited for Requiem for a Dream. I told one of the guys I work with who also listens to our show, he asked me, so what's coming up? And I told him Requiem, and he goes, oh God. And I was like, yeah, Jake's never seen it, so this should be interesting. He was like, that movie's fucking depressing, man. I was like, I know.
Yeah, we'll get it out of the way early November, and then we can lead into the fun, silly stuff after that.
It'll be a perfect segue. It really will.
And then I guess another new thing that we did is we recently were approached to interview a filmmaker. We got a fun opportunity to start talking to this guy on Instagram who just put out his own little short film and was just interested in talking to us about his movie, and then also just filmmaking in general and kind of the state of Hollywood, what the next generation could bring, all of that kind of stuff. So we're going to get into that now. It's just like 23 minutes long, and then we'll do the episode after that. Need to get into the movie draft as well. So before we go any further, let's just see what JR has to say. We're very excited to be joined by a young up-and-coming filmmaker. He recently released a very good, if I can spoil things, 30-plus minute short film. It's a period piece set in the early 1900s, but it's also what he describes as an experimental psychological horror film. And as that, I think it does a very good job. So, J.R. Stokes, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Jake and Dustin. It's great to finally be here. It took a little bit, but it's great to be here.
We're glad you're here, man.
I'll plug your stuff off the top, and then you can plug whatever you want at the end. Mm-hmm. So you're at Sid's Cinematics on YouTube and Instagram. Sid's SIDS Cinematics, and your film, The Headstone of Solitude, is for free, full film on YouTube, which is pretty cool. And people can actually find details and ratings and stuff about it on IMDb and Letterboxd, getting good reviews. I think it looks really good on that front too. So it's exciting.
Have you guys given it a review yet on there, if I may ask?
I have not. I actually don't have a Letterboxd, but I should on IMDb for sure.
All right.
Yeah, I think we should be upfront. We're good about giving our opinions like to each other and on the show.
Yeah,
we're bad about posting opinions. And, like,
that's all good, man. No worries at all. Hey, listen, people on there are vicious, man. You gotta have thick skin to be on there.
Yeah. Imagine, especially if you're making stuff, your own content.
Yeah, I mean, there's good and bad, but I mean, either way, you can't look too much into it.
Yeah.
Take it with a big old grain of salt.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think people should definitely check out your film, especially if you're into horror film. I think that it is pretty interesting and cool. I liked a lot of the ideas that you
Thank you.
approached it with. It's not your first film, I'm sure, even though you didn't have
No,
any other credits.
it's my first film.
Oh,
Wow.
okay.
Yeah, I mean, I've done like other like shorter stuff that's on my Instagram, like stuff that's like a few minutes long. But
Okay.
yeah, no, that's my debut film, I guess.
Hey, all right.
Yeah, I would say
Not too shabby, sir. Not too shabby.
yeah, the angles and the lighting and everything, I think you have a good eye. I mean, it speaks to your photography. You did send us your photography portfolio.
Yes.
And definitely know what you're doing behind the camera, I think. But
Thank you.
From a film perspective, there was a lot of angles and close-ups and different things, different shots. There's a shot with a close-up of a photograph with blood splatter on it that I really liked. I was like,
Thank you.
just a lot of the different things that happened and the pacing and stuff.
That shot was a complete accident.
Was it?
Yeah, the blood splattered was an accident. I really am glad that it came off, because that's my grandmother. That's her picture, and so my parents would kill me.
So
stained the picture.
I was about to call
Doing
it a
it for
happy
real high
accident,
stakes.
but then you brought up
Yeah.
legit.
Yeah.
Well, it worked really well in your film, man. So
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
I've noticed a lot of times that's kind of what happens, that you just start filming stuff, you
Yeah.
don't really know what'll work,
Yeah.
and then in editing you
Some
kind of plug it
accidental
in.
things happen. Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's interesting, as somebody who kind of wore all the different hats while you're making the film. Speaking of editing, you edited it, you shot it, photography, you directed it, you starred in it.
It was sort of a one-man army.
Did you have like a favorite piece of that you preferred more than, do you like writing more than directing or something like that?
I mean, I love directing. I mean, I just love being in a visual medium, like being involved in that, So, I mean, I try and always keep myself involved in anything I could do when it comes to a visual medium. So that being photography, videography, or, something to do with filmmaking. I would say personally, from this experience, I really enjoyed acting. Like, I love directing and I love, being behind the scenes, but acting is a lot of fun. And it's certainly a lot of fun when people recognize your performance. I was lucky enough to have, a lot of nice words spoken on my performance. And, that it meant a lot to hear.
Especially rocking an Irish accent. So
that I caught a little bit of flack for, but everything else was pretty good.
Hey, man. More power to you. That is a ballsy move for your first outing.
Listen, depending on who you ask, if you ask someone from like America, that they'll like it, but if you go to Ireland or any of those type of countries, they're gonna rip me apart.
My ex-wife is from Scotland, so every time I'd hear like American actors doing Scottish accents, I always thought, "Oh, this is great." Harsh reality.
Yeah.
Harsh reality. But I respect the decision, man. That was especially for that being the first like in front of the camera actual little short film. Ballsy move.
Yeah, I've never done any sort of like acting or anything.
So
thank you. I appreciate that.
So Jake brought up kind of like the approach towards your filmmaking, and I had watched a video that you posted of where you were reading some like people's reviews and stuff about the short film. And I was just curious to see like, all right, what else are like, what were people latching on to? Because I like seeing that. I like seeing what people gravitate towards, especially in film. I was noticing a lot of people compared your stuff to like, they were seeing some Kubrick in there, a little bit of David Lynch and all that.
Beau is Afraid. And
personally, I felt I saw a little bit more like Robert Eggers in there. Was that his kind of approach to stuff? Did that inspire you? Especially the aspect ratio instantly reminded me of The Lighthouse, which is one of my favorites. This reminds me, it put me in that place, which is, I loved that. All right.
I think that's a really good question. I honestly did not take anything from Eggers per se, although one of the few bad reviews I got compared my film to the likes of a Robert Eggers film, but they also said that I made a corpse. So I mean, you can take that at face value.
Yeah, I think if the worst that happens is you're compared to Robert Eggers, I think you're all right.
But I think certainly me, Eggers, and I took inspiration from the same type of film. Actually, Robert Eggers is making a Nosferatu remake next year, and my film Headstone certainly takes a lot of inspiration from the likes of Nosferatu and Dracula and those type of early 1900s silent horror films. So I think we're in the same boat. But no, I didn't really take much influence from Eggers himself.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Well, hey, more power to you, because I think that's a win.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I liked the format, the choices you made with the aspect ratio and the sepia tone and film grain and everything. I felt like it added well to feeling like it's actually a early 1900s little film.
Thank you. Yeah, I think in making Headstone, alluding to what you guys were saying earlier about kind of swinging for the fences, I think a lot of, I guess, smaller filmmakers, I think they're a little bit too scared, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word choice, but I think they're a little too enclosed to make more ballsier and more bold choices and trying to get out there. You know, I think when you go on YouTube and you look up smaller filmmakers, a lot of them kind of tend to be around the same type of film, you know, like post-apocalyptic stuff. And I really just tried making something that was kind of out of the ordinary, I guess. And, you know, there was certainly a lot of inspiration from the likes of like David Lynch and like I said, a lot of those early 1900s silent horror films.
Yeah, I think you definitely get that. I'm curious what other horror inspirations or what your favorite horror movies are when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Well, definitely a lot of David Lynch. Like just when I was making this film, just really the emptiness of his films, kind of the dread that comes along with in like experiencing his films, I think was certainly in the back of my mind. I took a lot of inspiration from Eraserhead, which is a personal favorite of mine, and I mean, really, like most of his films, it's not easy to interpret, and I think Headstone is not, at least from my point of view and from what others have told me, it's not quite easiest to interpret, at least on the first watch. So I think definitely a lot of David Lynch influence as well, in addition to everything else.
Yeah, I could see that. There are definitely a few scenes that I felt that it was definitely up to interpretation as far as what the context of this is or who these two people on screen are
absolutely
in relation to each other and things like that. So I could see that for sure. There was a couple of really good, I guess, writing lines from a writing perspective.
Thank you.
There's a spot where I think you say, or your character says, "What good is love when your lover's in the fucking ground?" And I'm writing that down. That is a really good.
Thank you. Thank you.
And then that one scene, the like long take scene where action happens off screen, which I really liked the choice to do.
Thank you.
Off camera, and then your character comes back and is covered in blood. When you say Amber isn't too far from me, she's right next door, that kind of broke me out. It chilled me. I was like, I don't like that at all. That's really gross.
I'm glad you felt that way. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's honestly the biggest up for interpretation moment in the film. I mean, I've really tried to let that door be open for a lot of the film and letting, you know, the viewer decide what's going on. But specifically with that scene, it's right there. Like, what's going on? Is this the real Amber? Is this some random woman he took off the street? Like, I think it's really up to you to dictate how far gone this guy is.
Now, I'm not going to ask you for your definitive answer, but since you wrote it and all that, did you leave it to interpretation for yourself? Did you kind of try to like trick your own mind with when you wrote that scene, or do you have a very specific like answer to that?
I think that's a really good question. I honestly hadn't thought about that myself. The way I write from the viewer's point of view. At least I try to. And so I didn't necessarily try and answer any questions. Instead, I just tried coming up with ways in which the viewer would maybe observe it. And so really it was more so like theories and analogies that were in my head rather than answers and like definitive choices.
I really like that, actually. I think I think there's too many times where movies want to give you a definitive answer,
Yeah,
or
no,
audiences need a definitive answer, and
yeah.
I kind of lean towards the like, no, I'll leave it open.
Yep, absolutely. I think that's how you engage an
So I
audience.
respect
And
that, man.
thank you. I think that's how you engage an audience, and especially for a very small filmmaker, I think I kind of have to engage an audience in that type of way. And I think it's a little bit ballsy, but it's it's certainly what I want to do is to really just try and engage an audience.
Yeah, you have to capture their attention
Yeah,
for sure.
absolutely.
I think it's a really interesting idea to set it in such a long time ago, because I imagine the music is public domain and you do a lot of interesting things that you couldn't do.
Yeah.
When I tried to make like a short film in high school, you of course want to use all your favorite music and it's all current and stuff. So it doesn't really work as well. But I thought that not only does it add to the setting and the ambiance, but it also makes practical sense.
Yeah, I had interest in doing an original score, like bringing on a composer, but ultimately I kind of just went on to some popular period pieces from that time, like music wise, and I just took from that. But for my next film, I would like to have an original score attached.
What's your next film about?
It's gonna be yeah, no, I've actually been actively developing it pretty extensively. It's sort of this crime drama film revolving around addiction, and I've planned for it to be feature length. And it's heavily inspired by the likes of Requiem for a Dream, directed by Darren Aronofsky.
Yes.
Okay.
I freaking love that film, man. I admire that film so much.
That's one of Dustin's favorite films of all time.
So me and you are in the same boat.
I am a massive advocate for that film.
Yes, I just love Darren Aronofsky in general. I mean, The Wrestler is just such a huge inspiration.
Now
to
we're
me.
talking.
Yeah, I mean, Requiem is a masterpiece. And I hope you guys check that out. I'd love to come back on here for that. I think that's going to be a really fun watch.
100%, man.
Definitely looking forward to it.
100%. Man, that's awesome.
You're speaking his language.
I'm in the same boat, man.
I've never seen it, and
and
we are talking about doing an episode on it in the next couple of weeks, and so I'm going to watch it for the first time, and he talks about it all the time, so it'll be fun.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Well, I don't know if fun is the best word.
Yeah, I think with this material that I've been working with, I've been trying to channel the same disturbed aura from Requiem. I mean, me personally, I wasn't disturbed by Requiem because I have a hard time being disturbed from films. I'm not sure what it is. I don't know if I'm like emotionally numb. It's just a matter of like I can appreciate it, but I can also recognize it without being disturbed. And so I'm really just trying to withdraw from that aura from Requiem onto this film. A lot of the same themes and whatnot of like just violence and self-resentment and overall really addiction.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you.
The big one for me that I actually wanted to ask actually wasn't pertaining directly to Headstone, but just you as a filmmaker and just kind of your outlook on stuff. I know Hollywood currently is kind of in a state of like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
You as this independent filmmaker, very small but growing.
Yeah.
Kind of what is like your goal or your opinion on what the future of Hollywood should look like, needs to look like,
as the
or
next,
possibly will.
That's a really good question.
How do you influence
it's
that?
certainly a very scary question. I mean, I was 17 when I made this film. I just turned 18 a few weeks ago. So it's certainly a long path from now for me to kind of sit there and think about it. But I mean, I would hope that smaller and more passionate individuals have the chance and the opportunity to just really pursue what they want to create, tell those stories. I mean, you can have an hour-long conversation about the lack of originality, and that's stuff that's already been passed around. I mean, everyone kind of knows that there's a certain lack of originality in the industry right now. So I would only hope that more doors are open for smaller creators such as myself as the years go on, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's something that we're
definitely.
big advocates of, that
Mhm.
we talk to a lot of small filmmakers and short filmmakers, and
Mhm.
just excited about kind of supporting that vision
Yeah.
and the dreams that they have to
Thank you.
create new things. I mean, it's inevitable that the
Mhm.
old guard will move on and the next
Yeah.
generation will take their place. And so I think encouraging
Right,
that.
right.
It's
One of my
certainly it's
go ahead.
certainly difficult when the old guard is this giant corporation, just mass infest
Yeah,
of just suits, really, but here's to hoping for some sort of like 60s and 70s independent cinema renaissance per se.
yeah.
But I
Oh,
mean,
absolutely.
the work that you guys are personally doing by giving creators such as myself a platform is incredible. Like, you guys are giving my work and others' work, a platform to display to other film fans, and I think that's amazing.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth checking out. People should definitely do that. One of
Oh
my
man,
favorite like special features I ever saw on DVDs was either from Signs or The Sixth Sense or something, and it was just old short films of M. Night Shyamalan made when he was a kid,
Mhm.
and that's where they all start. The ones that care a lot, they start
Mhm.
making movies, doing what you're doing, and
Yeah.
some of them are silly and some of them are great, and there's little nuggets of inspiration that you just carry forward
Mhm.
into the big
Absolutely.
projects.
Of course.
I think storytellers are important, and stuff like what you're doing, Bud, is
Thank you.
I look forward to seeing you produce more and seeing kind
Thank
of
you.
your
I really
growth.
appreciate that.
And a storyteller primarily for me, because I love storytelling, and movies are
Mhm.
my favorite medium for that. So seeing where you're starting right now, uh, that's hopeful for people like Jake and I, where it's like you got enough passion to keep going, and
Mhm.
your first outing it was pretty cool.
Thank
Like
you.
I didn't know what to expect. Your opening shot with like the music and all that, I was instantly going, "Oh, this kid, he gets me. Like this is going to be my kind of
Thank you. I'm glad you
thing."
enjoyed.
uh, so I'm very, well, both Jake and I, we are big advocates for the little guy. I mean,
Mhm.
we're a tiny little fish in this
Yeah.
giant pond, even for this independent show.
Mhm.
I think I think Jake triggers more people and getting into like arguments online over if Last Jedi is actually a good film or
Yeah,
not.
Yeah.
Um, but we're always like, we want to support the little
Mhm.
people or the little guys because it's important. We're the ones that,
Mhm.
you guys as filmmakers, you're going to be the ones taking over at
Mhm.
some point. So yeah, we want to be there from, the ground floor, and
Thank
yeah,
to see
you.
you grow. So this is really cool. It's special for us to have you on here, dude.
Dude,
yeah.
it's my honor. Seriously, it's great to finally be on here. I think you guys got a great show going on, and
Appreciate it.
I can't wait to see what the future holds for the likes of both of our uh, creative endeavors.
Yeah, it'll be great. Before we
Oh yeah.
let you
Oh
go,
yeah.
we're gonna move on into our movie draft where we drafted a bunch of
Mhm.
movies for the year. Um,
Okay.
and Exorcist Believer, speaking of
Yes.
unoriginal movies, just came out. Um, Curious if you have opinions about the Exorcist remake or requel, and also if you have a favorite horror movie that
I
came
do
out
have a
this
favorite
year.
horror movie. I was talking about this the other day, but regarding the requel, I mean, I like Leslie Odom Jr. and I like Ellen Burstyn, who's also in Requiem. But I mean, other than that, I don't have anything else to think about when it comes to that film. I mean, I saw the preview a few times in the theater, but I don't think I'm going to check it out. Um,
We're both bitter at David Gordon Green for what he did to
Yes.
Halloween, so I'm
Fuck
trying to
that
avoid
movie.
it too.
and in terms of a favorite horror movie from this year, I really, really enjoyed Talk to Me. Like I thought that was a phenomenal film, and the lights went out in my theater, like the power went out mid watch. So you had to imagine
Oh,
how fast my heart was racing watching
yeah,
that film.
that's like a bonus
Oh man,
4D
Yeah, Jesus
that
experience.
reminds me of
Christ.
like back in the day when I was in high school. My
Mhm.
friends and I went and saw The Ring in the
Yeah.
theater, like opening night, and after the opening of like scene in that film, someone's cell phone, which
Yeah.
this was the early days of cell phones, dude. So it was weird.
You didn't really
Someone's
expect
phone
it, yeah.
began to ring right at the opening of the film.
Oh my
And
god.
the whole theater was just like, we're going to kill that person. This is it.
He's voted off. All right. Well, JR, plug whatever you want to plug. Feel free. Shout out whatever you want to do. Where can people find you?
Well, I mean, obviously the YouTube, if you want to watch Headstone of Solitude, I really appreciate everyone who goes and even takes time to just check out at least 10 minutes of the film. I mean, and if it's not your cup of tea, that's okay. You know, the biggest thing I appreciate is that person that'll sit down and take time out of their day to watch when I create. So definitely check out Headstone on YouTube and Sid Cinematics on Instagram as well. And if you like Headstone, you can rate it on IMDb and Letterboxd, and check out Movie Boners on Instagram and YouTube and everything else you can find a podcast on.
Yeah, you guys should do that.
And that's it.
Hey.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll put a link to your movie and your YouTube channel in the description of this episode, so it'll be easy for people to find. Definitely recommend checking it out. I enjoyed it thoroughly.
Thank you.
Yeah, very interesting film. Well, thank you, man. This was
course.
awesome.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, and I'm sure it won't be the last time. We'll talk to you later.
Absolutely. I'd love to come back on. It'll be an honor.
Cool.
Alrighty.
Right. So there we go. Yeah. That was such a fun interview.
I'm so happy you didn't warn me about that.
I didn't really know what we would do or how I didn't have a plan. What you see is what you get with this show.
Sorry, it probably isn't that funny, but that was fantastic.
It's funny to us if you go from where I led into the interview and then skip the interview and come back to us. That's exactly what we experienced. Anyway.
I just like the arm movement that you did. And here we go. All right.
And we're back. Okay. We're just trying to, it's like the man behind the curtain. You're not supposed to draw attention to production.
It's us. We draw attention all the time. Big thank you to JR. It was a great interview. It was a lot of fun talking to you.
He was really cool. I did not know going into it that he was only 18 years old. I was very impressed that he presented himself in a much more mature manner, which was very surprising, but also very cool. I have a lot of hope for the next generation of filmmakers.
Me too.
So, okay, so let's get into the episode and move on to the John Carpenter stuff that we were going to talk about.
Oh yeah, we're gonna skip all of the housekeeping shit, huh? Cool.
Yeah, we don't need to do any of the housekeeping stuff. I think that I actually don't remember of any housekeeping that we need to do. There's no need for any of that.
Does that mean that
since
I have officially taken the lead in the draft? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it kind of does mean that. Yeah. So for the first time since the beginning of April, it's with a heavy heart that I have to say that Dustin has taken the lead in the movie draft, and by a decent amount. It started out as like a couple thousandths of a point, but freaking the Exorcist Believer and Expendables 4 are just tanking, just dropping more and more every single day in the IMDb rating. And so I am absolutely losing thoroughly. I don't know what's going to happen. You have 6 more movies to come out this year, and I have 2.
Okay.
And so the goal for me is for my $600 million lead to hang on, and also have several of these movies bring your average back down, because I mean the Marvels might, Hunger Games probably won't, Wish probably won't. I have minimal hope at this point. I'm a little sad.
You're a little sad about this one.
I feel it slipping through my fingers as we talk. Yes.
All right.
It's great. It's also weird that this week, the two biggest movies at the box office are movies that neither of us drafted.
I was
Killers
trying
of
to
the Flower
remember, like,
Moon
did
and
either of us get Killers of the Flower Moon? And then I
well, I
remember
didn't think it was going to go to theaters. I thought it was like The Irishman that went straight to
straight
streaming
to
or whatever.
Apple, yeah, because it's being marketed as an Apple movie. So
Yeah. And then nobody knew that Taylor Swift, the Eras Tour, was going to come out in theaters. And that is cleaning up at the moment as number one.
Yeah.
As it should, but, you know. So, yes, you caught me. I was going to skip all of this nonsense, but congratulations for the moment. We'll see what happens in the next couple of months.
All right. We shall see. You watch anything new?
Yes, I did.
Me too.
Speaking of that spoiler episode with Martin from Film versus Film, I told you last time that I would watch The Creator, and I did. And I would tell you that I would give you my thoughts on it, even though you already know because you did a whole episode spoiling it with me and him, with Martin. But just for the listener's sake, yes, I saw it. Yes, you were pretty much right that my hype was a little bit, led me to be disappointed a little bit.
Yeah.
I would say a fair amount, quite a bit actually. Visually, great. I think we all agreed on that it was visually really good. But all of the plot and questions and message of the movie, other movies have done in a much better way already. And so there wasn't a lot really new or terribly interesting there. I couldn't stop thinking how nefarious it was for the AI to put this supercomputer or the super weapon, whatever they call it, inside the body of a child, and then use that to emotionally manipulate humans as if it actually was a child when it's clearly not. And I was disappointed that the humans actually did, care for it as if it was a child when it's just a computer. I don't understand. So
yeah. For you new listeners, if you're going, whoa, what the hell? We hate AI. You should listen to our Blade Runner episodes to hear us tell you just how much we don't trust AI. Fuck AI. Fuck it.
You should not trust AI. It's not good for you.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more to it, and I'd highly recommend that Film versus Film spoiler episode. But in general, that's kind of my thoughts on it. Yeah. I would say it was okay. I really hope Rebel Moon is good now in December, because that was my other thing to look forward to for the rest of the year. And then, well, the other new thing I saw was Taxi Driver, which we did a full episode on. And it's a movie that I've been meaning to see for a really long time and hadn't. So I was glad that we kind of were forced to by that episode. And I liked that movie quite a bit. I think I'll see it more and more. It kind of has stuck with me even since we did that episode talking about it. And I've had more thoughts about it. So it is definitely a very interesting movie. And then the rest of my time has basically been watching a show, I think it's on like Discovery Channel or something, called Homestead Rescue. And it's all about, this is like a reality show. Like it's not like a normal, whatever. What do you call that? Where
is this going to be another kind of show like your, what is that, Love at First Sight or whatever that bullshit is that you watch on Netflix?
No, it's not like Love is Blind.
Or Love is Blind.
Bullshit. It's a very fun show. Yeah, it's kind of like that. Although Homestead Rescue is really cool because I feel like it's educational, at least for me in my interests, because it's about this family that lives in Alaska, and they basically go around and help people who are trying to create homesteads. They're trying to create like an off the grid cabin where they grow their own food and get their own power and water and all this stuff, but they're all failing for whatever reason. And these people have been doing it for a really long time. So they go to help them get back on their feet and figure stuff out and impart some knowledge and stuff. So as someone who needs to probably build a chicken coop next year and tries to get a garden going, it's been pretty interesting to get some ideas from there. So I've been enjoying that. But that's about it.
So did you notice the irony in like everything you just said though?
that I'm watching
No, that
TV show.
that it's about people trying to get off the grid, but they have a film crew there showing where they're trying to get off the grid and
Yeah. Well, they're not like conspiracy theorists off the
I
grid.
didn't
Like
say
they
that.
can't
I'm just
have
saying.
cell phones or
Oh, okay.
anything.
Because I was like, they're kind of.
It's just that they don't need to be reliant on the power from the power company in case the power goes out. They want their own source of power, or the water, or in case the water like dries up, they need their own source of water and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
Or if the pandemic happens and you can't get toilet paper anywhere or food anywhere, or if eggs are like $10, you need to figure out how to get your own stuff. It's just like that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. So, how many times have you watched Terrifier 2 since last time we talked?
Only like.
You look so sheepish right now.
It may have been a couple times. It may have been a couple times, but no. Because I've been watching John Carpenter movies, especially after you and I kind of like realized I was not on the same page and was way behind.
Yeah, you're like, we're watching like two or three of his movies, right? And I was like, no, we're watching 9.
Yeah, and I was like, fuck. No, I only ended up watching Terrifier 1 and 2 like a couple more times. Fell asleep. It's already become like a movie I watch to help me go to sleep. So I love that movie.
That's good.
Yep, but we already know that. No, I did watch something new because I haven't really talked about it, but it has been probably my most like hyped up, anticipated show of the year, and it finally came out, and it was amazing. So, as you know, Jake, I'm a big fan of Mike Flanagan's stuff on Netflix, and The Fall of the House of Usher finally came out, and I think I only ever binge his stuff. I don't binge any other show. I watch an episode of something and I'm like, cool, whatever. His shit comes on and I'm like, well, I'm dedicating a whole afternoon to this. Like, yeah. It was so good. It's so good.
That's great to hear.
As a fan of like Edgar Allan Poe's stuff, to see something modern that like actually does a really good job of adapting his work into kind of a modern setting and does it in such a at times clever and then very obvious ways, but it never seems, I don't know, forced or whatever. It's really well done. Mike Flanagan is, I think, underrated. I think if you're a horror fan and you're not a fan of Mike Flanagan, you got some rethinking to do because he is so good at what he does. So I became obsessed with The Fall of House of Usher because it's amazing.
Okay. Yeah.
And then
I'm excited about that. We plan to binge it this weekend, right around the Halloween season.
It, like his other stuff, it's a nice slow burn. It has a couple moments that you're like, ooh, okay. And then it's got just weird as hell moments throughout it. And I was so happy about that. And then I watched this other movie. It was just a random, kind of like what we used to do, where it was like, we'll hit the random button and watch whatever pops up.
Yeah.
It was kind of like that. I came across this movie from 2020. Nope, that's wrong. I don't remember what year. Anyways, it's called The Lodge. It is about this couple, this man and his fiance, who take the man's 2 kids to this lodge way out in the middle of nowhere during the winter. They're going for Christmas to spend Christmas there. The kids don't want to spend any time with the soon-to-be stepmom, and she wants to be there to like build a relationship. But then weird shit happens at this lodge, and she has like a cultish background, so that kind of plays into some of the weird shit that goes on. And as I was watching, I was like, seriously, what is wrong with me? Why am I watching this shit? Luckily, it's not like, this isn't a spoiler, but it's not like super culty. It's just kind of, it has elements in it. But
subtext.
Yeah. It was okay. I was really like bumming hard on it for a little bit. But it was one of those movies where the final frame of the movie was like, okay, I'll give you a little credit for that one. That was okay.
Finished strong.
Yeah. So,
all right,
and that was really it. Just those, because Fall of House. God, seriously, dude, Fall of House of Usher. I loved it. I loved it.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about revisiting Midnight Mass, which I've only seen once, but absolutely loved.
Midnight Mass is
and
so
I was
good.
Like, I want to watch it again, knowing the whole story, like where it ends up and how it ends. It gets crazy. It's very slow burn, like you said.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's
so now we can actually get into the episode. And it's been a while since we've done an episode about a filmmaker specifically. We've previously done episodes on Quentin Tarantino and M. Night Shyamalan, who are both also great writer-directors in their own right. But one thing they don't do is compose an original music score for their movies. And so I think that edges out or leads, I don't know, adds another dynamic to the great John Carpenter. And so we thought that it would be fun to talk about him as a filmmaker and also kind of his most, I guess you could say, pure movies, pure stories. The ones that he did the most on didn't have as many cooks in the kitchen, you could say.
Yeah.
So there's 9 movies where he wrote and directed and composed, at least did all 3 of those roles. A lot of them he did other things as well, like editing and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, his movies are interesting because they're always listed as John Carpenter's and then, the title. And it really is, because he does, whether it's composing, writing, and directing, he's either doing all those 3 or he's doing like co-producing, co-editing, or he'll do like the score only for a film. He won, I think it was the not the Bram Stoker Award for Music. He won some award for his original score for the new Halloween trilogy. Although those movies suck, his music is good. Yep.
Yeah.
But he is a one-man band when it comes to filmmaking. And I think it's interesting that he does either science fiction, action, or horror, or he does kind of a weird combination of all 3. And it always has a unique look to it. His music, you can always tell because it's got that like synthesizer kind of aspect to it. His movies are always, we were just talking slow burns. John Carpenter is at his best when he's making a patient, slow burn film. I think later years in his career, like early 2000s, kind of tripped up a little bit, but that happens. No one makes however many movies he has. I forget what the total under his belt, but it's a lot and has a perfect record. And I think it's also funny, his movies, a lot of them actually have been flops. But then after their flops, they've become like almost, let's just skip the box office success and we'll go to actual success and cult classics. They're viewed
legendary,
as like, this is top tier. John Carpenter is considered a legend in Hollywood because he is. Yeah,
it's kind of interesting to me because he has a very simplistic or kind of matter of fact style. Like it's not overly stylized. It's very kind of cut and dry, the way that he shoots movies. And so they often started out and feel like B movies, but because of, I guess, the purity of them and the way that they were written and directed, they definitely, majority of them grow to be that kind of cult classic status, which is very, very interesting. He's said some interesting things from a writing perspective. I think that he's talked about, if you, like you said, all of his movies kind of can blend those different genres together. And that was one thing I was noticing watching the movies that I remember as like an action movie or a sci-fi movie. I'm like, these are actually pretty scary at the same time. There's a lot of heavy horror elements involved here. And he's talked about how horror is very simple, because if you just sit there and think about what scares you, then that is probably going to be scary to everybody, because we're all human, and you can easily tap into that human uncomfortability with murderers or stalkers or whatever it ends up being.
Yeah, I love his take on it. It was funny seeing that he said he was like a big fan of the what he calls the cheap scare, which all of us would know it as the jump scare. And for some reason, I just never associated him with jump scares. And then revisiting some of his movies, I was like, oh, he does jump scares a lot, but his jump scares feel different. They don't feel like what he would call a cheap scare. They actually come across as kind of like, oh, no, that's actually effective. Like, when you're watching The Thing, and The Thing, jumps out or comes out, or you see a head crawling across the floor suddenly. It's you watch Halloween and Michael punches through the closet door. It's
yeah, I think maybe the reason it feels not as cheap is because it is earned, in the sense that there's that buildup of tension, and then you wait so long for something to happen, and you expect it to happen, and it doesn't happen, and then when it finally does unexpectedly, there's kind of that release of energy in your body at the same time, and you're like, finally, I knew it was coming, I just didn't know when.
Yeah, and he has such a unique eye for like monster design, or just how he writes his villains. I think it's interesting for like Assault on Precinct 13, which should actually be titled Assault on Precinct 9, but in District 13. But that was a studio decision.
That's a very long title.
Yeah. His villains are like, the villains in that movie, he based them off of like the zombies in Night of the Living Dead, which I thought was interesting. And then watching it, because I went into it knowing that little tidbit, so I was like really curious to see how his villains acted and what they looked like. And at first I was like, well, I mean, they're quiet, but then there's the whole actual like where they're congregating outside the precinct, and it was very much, oh, that's a good nod to Romero and to this monster movie that like helped inspire, or at least influence,
breaking through the window. And
it was really fun to watch that and see like his influences come out, but in a, I guess, not a like tongue-in-cheek or kind of wink way. It's just there. If you catch it, you're cool. If you don't catch it, you'll have no idea that you saw the nod. I thought that was really cool with how he's done that before. And he's fun. He throws in like cheesy stuff now and again. I think there was a couple on his list of his trifecta that I had never seen before, which was like, hey, let's see where this guy started and how I feel about his early stuff. Dude, I was cracking up during Dark Star, his first film. I thought that was like, it's so low budget even for 1974. Like, it is shockingly low budget. But I enjoyed it. I thought this is just a silly good time. Like, I like this.
Yeah.
And the alien in it is, dude, I haven't laughed that hard at an alien design in a long time. I was so happy about that.
Yeah, the like beach ball alien mascot guy
with weird hand things that like sticks to the walls. And
yeah, Dark Star was definitely interesting, and I had never seen it before either, and I was interested in it. It's funny, Martin mentioned it on the Film versus Film podcast, because there's a reference to Dark Star in The Creator that we didn't get because we hadn't watched it yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a very fun movie that is very dry kind of humor. Like when I first started it, I didn't anticipate that all these guys were joking around, and so I felt like I missed some, and I had to go back and rewatch it. I was like, oh, I get what's going on here. It was very they were obviously guys who had been in space for a very long time on this mission, and just kind of getting punchy with each other. And yeah, it's a very kind of a, I guess, satirical story about these scientists and their mission in space to destroy planets. Like they blow up planets. It's interestingly his only movie that's rated G.
Yeah.
All of his other movies are rated R, which was wild to me.
Well, if you talked to him or asked him, he would tell you that The Fog should have been PG and not rated R, because he purposely took blood out of that film to achieve a lower rating. But the MPAA still didn't like the idea of watching guys get stabbed all the way through, and
yeah, they're probably still traumatized by Halloween too. So
yeah,
like this guy, he doesn't get a pass.
And it's almost like he just decided to lean into it with his following projects. It's like, fine, this is what I'm gonna do.
Right. Yeah, it just becomes, this is the John Carpenter way now.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting. I had never known this, but I guess like old Howard Hawks Westerns, or just Westerns in general, are actually his biggest influence, and like what kind of got him into the love of film. And yet he's never made a Western film. I thought that was kind of interesting. I would have figured he would have tried to make a Western early on, especially like during that time, like the 70s, 80s, when Westerns were bigger than what, but yeah, I thought,
now,
that's so interesting. And then trying to watch some of his movies with that mentality, that's, to me, I don't know if I just wasn't catching it, but I couldn't find a lot of like Western influence. I don't know. I thought, like, I guess Assault on Precinct 13 might have the most Western influence in it, but the rest of his films, I really don't. I've never really caught it.
I feel like there's a references, or I guess kind of homages in Escape from New York and Escape from LA, and especially Snake Plissken's kind of anti-hero character. He's kind of a cowboy guy who's on the run and a lone gunman, that kind of thing. There might be things there for sure. But yeah, the only reason I thought that he was a fan of John Wayne and Rio Bravo and stuff is because I noticed, I forget what movie, but in one of his movies, there's a writer who's the name of John Wayne's character in that movie.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, looked it up, and it's actually John Carpenter was the writer of the movie, but he used John Wayne's character's name as his pseudonym. And I guess he does that a lot because he'll put in some random pseudonym as the editor, even though he's the one that edited it or something like that. Because he said it's because he gets tired of seeing his own name on everything. Like it'll be John Carpenter's this movie, written by John Carpenter, composed by John Carpenter, directed by John Carpenter, edited by, and so he just gets sick of it and throws in random names instead.
Well, it's almost like, dude, if you don't like to see your name that many times, like hire a crew. There are people that can do this for you. But then at the same time, it's like, or just you do you. Because
there's like an interesting amount of humility. He's like, I want to do it. I want to do all those things. I like doing all the roles. I just don't want all this credit or praise applied to me, which is interesting.
It's true.
I really enjoyed how he includes so many actors that he's worked with before in every movie. Like it makes it really fun to watch kind of all of his movies back to back, because you're like, here's Jamie Lee Curtis in The Fog, here's all of these all of these characters, and all, not characters but actors and stuff, they all just reoccur. And there's a really interesting chart on Wikipedia on John Carpenter's page where it's like, this actor was in these 4 movies, and it's just a whole chart of the whole thing, which is really fun.
Yeah, watching, like, going through his movies back to back and seeing the same, like, it's not a lot of them, it's a few of them, popping up here and there. It was fun for me because it's like, it kind of brings me back to the Adam Sandler thing that you and I have talked about, where he's always with his core group, and you can tell that they're just they must enjoy each other genuinely to keep wanting to work together. And you can tell that with John Carpenter and these cast members, where they just constantly just show up. It's like he must make such a good environment and just like a well-maintained work area or whatever, like to keep these people wanting to keep working with him and playing some of these characters go through some of these intense situations. I think that says a lot about his character, where they trust him enough that they want to keep coming back for more. So I realized something during this, and I felt kind of bad about it, because I was like, I've always, obviously I'm a giant fan of Halloween, the original Halloween, and Michael Myers and all that, and I'm a fan of, In the Mouth of Madness is one of my all-time favorite horror films in general, and I love The Thing, like They Live, all of these movies I love, but I guess I've always kind of taken them for granted, or some of them for granted. So I'm watching all these movies this last week, and I kind of had a realization where I was like, I think I'm a way bigger John Carpenter fan, and I think he kind of deserves to be put higher on the echelon of iconic horror creators than Wes Craven. Like, don't at me, but I feel like he deserves it for what he's produced, or the quantity and the quality of a lot of his films. I feel he really is on the Mount Rushmore of like thriller horror filmmakers. His stuff, I just kind of realized that I was like, I'm a fan of his even more than I realized. Like, this is crazy.
No, I felt the same way for sure, because I was watching all of these movies, and I felt like a lot of them I had seen before, but I felt like I was kind of approaching them all with new eyes, thinking of them in the aspect of him writing it and him directing it and him composing it. I was thinking of like how all these pieces fit together and what it accomplishes, what he's trying to accomplish with these films. And there were a lot where I was like, I really I enjoyed Halloween before this, but then rewatching, I was like, it's so technically intense and well done and well put together, and it's obviously not the first time that you've been put in the killer's point of view before, but it's just the way that it's done, and then the reveal that it's a kid and all this stuff. It's like, for this to be an original story and to reveal like this an amazing story, and the way it builds up slowly over time, and you see so much over his shoulder before you even see him and his face and his mask. It's just all of the things in all of his movies, whether it's They Live or Escape from New York or whatever, especially the sci-fi ones, obviously, I'm like, these are such incredible ideas, and I don't know, I just found them so engrossing that even though they're 70s, 80s, pretty low budget, R-rated movies, but he does such a good job of executing an idea and kind of just making it iconic on its face. And also, he doesn't have any extra fluff in his movies. Like, it's a tight 90 minutes pretty much for all of his movies. Like, he doesn't ever go over the top. He's like, let's just get in, tell the story, get out. And I just love the simplicity and the rawness of all of his movies.
Yeah, you could tell with like, when I watched Ghosts of Mars, which I had never seen before, so it was the first time watching it. I've always known that it was like kind of a failure all around. And my thought when I was watching it was, this feels a little too gimmicky. This didn't feel like John Carpenter to me. This felt like, we're going to get a little more pizzazz with what's going on. He kind of lost the simplicity of it. I think the cast was kind of wrong as well, but that's just me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I felt Ghost of Mars was trying either too hard to go gimmicky, and I know he came out and was like, I wanted to make just a kind of a silly, over the top sci-fi action movie that's just entertaining. And
Mm-hmm.
I think he tried too hard for that. I think if he had stuck with his formula, especially like, with Dark Star, if he would have tapped back into that kind of his roots, or even, I mean, he could have even gone the silly route or just over the top stuff like he has in like They Live, where it
Yeah.
works so well in that. But I think he just, I don't know, he got tripped up somewhere with Ghost of Mars. And I did find myself being like, this movie's a bummer, but everyone's got to make like one that you're just like, ooh, yeah, this one's not there, bud. Nope.
Yeah, I think from what I could tell, Ghosts of Mars, and then The Ward, I think was the last movie he directed in 2010.
Yeah.
It seems like he's kind of gotten away from directing movies, that he's not really a fan of it anymore. And I could understand with all of the studio interference and this is what a John Carpenter movie needs to be. And he's like, excuse me, I'm John
I am John
Carpenter. It's
Carpenter.
whatever.
I think
it's
I know
whatever
what
I want it to be. Yeah. And so now he just seems to just focus on the composing music, which is good. Definitely.
And like co-writing video games. I guess he co-wrote Fear 3 and doing music for video games. And he's touring. He has like this album. It's what is it called? Lost Souls 3 or something like that.
That's cool.
Or he did tour, which I think is cool. Like, this dude is so comfortable. He knows what he likes. He knows what he's doing. So he just keeps doing it. But the man's like 80-something years old, isn't he? 70
he's old.
Years old.
Old as fuck.
I
thought when you said he was touring, I thought you were going to say he's touring with the Coupe de Villes, his like band with the original Michael Myers and Nick Castle, who he writes movies with.
It could be. I mean, his concerts are his original scores, but it's done like with not just an orchestra, but like a band and stuff too. So I think that's just kind of cool.
That is cool. Yeah, right before Ghost of Mars, he did Escape from LA, which I think has kind of the same problems of trying to go over the top.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like really awkward CGI. The digital effects are pretty rough in it. I mean, it's 1996, but I don't know. It falls into the push feeling like it looks so real and then it totally doesn't look so real.
Yeah, well, and Escape from LA is an interesting one because he's always been known to be kind of anti-sequel, or I shouldn't say anti-sequel, but he doesn't want to direct any sequels to his films. He feels like, why would I make the same movie twice? He'll like co-write it, or he'll produce it or do the music for it, which he's done with some of the Halloween sequels throughout the years. So him to come back and actually direct Escape from LA, you would think like, hey, this should be cool. But again, you're trying too hard. And that one's weird to me because that one comes right after one of my favorites, which is done so well with like cool practical effects. Yeah, it has some weird CGI, but it's like, it's interesting CGI. It's freaky CGI. But the practical effects and just the mind trip that is in the Mouth of Madness, it's kind of a bummer to go, for me personally, to go from something so bizarre and crazy to not.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. I mean, I definitely get wanting to make another escape movie, and Kurt Russell is great as Snake Plissken, and they had decent ideas with it being set in LA instead of New York and doing all the LA things like star maps. And the thing that I think works the best is the surgical plastic surgery place where he goes in and there's a guy that they're just cutting people's limbs off and attaching them to their bodies to try to augment implant other people's bodies onto their faces in other areas, and that is like scary and gruesome. And I'm like, I get it. Like, this is the most extreme version of the LA lifestyle, which is definitely what they go for. And there's fun jokes like the gridlock on the highways and stuff like that. Like, it's LA, of course. The highways suck, but yeah, it is a terrible idea to have Snake Plissken playing basketball. I will have to admit that scene always. I'm like, why are we doing this right now?
It's like, so Escape from LA was 96, right? And then in 90,
height of like Laker fever, I'm sure.
So it had to have been something. When did this is a stretch, but you'll get the connection.
Okay.
When did Alien Resurrection come out? Was that like 97, 98?
Oh my god, it was 97.
Okay. Nailed it. So what the fuck was going on? I mean, I get it. The Bulls were huge. Like, America was into basketball. But did we really have to try and incorporate like horror sci-fi heroes or anti-heroes having to play basketball? Like, what the?
Yeah, it's like, we like basketball, but you don't have to shoehorn it into every sci-fi horror movie that we have.
There are moments where you're like, wow, the studio interference is thick with this one right here.
Yeah. Yep. That's exactly right.
I'm shocked.
Although I do love
Michael Jordan show up, or anyone from the Bulls, like, cameo for some reason.
Yeah, do some product placement or something.
But I think for him, like, Carpenter's early stuff, I mean, it's so good. And when I say, I guess early these days, I'm going from Dark Star to, like, well, I guess Mouth of Madness would be probably the last, like, great one to me that he did. Yeah. But that timeline, and that's 94. Still like 20 years, give or take, right?
Yeah, Mouth of Madness was 1994, and Dark Star was 1974. So yeah, exactly 20 years. So
a 20-year run where, personally, I felt every one of these is just so good. And I think you hit it right on the head of just, he has a simple, like, direction that he knows he wants to go. He knows how he wants to achieve it. And he's not going to get super flashy. I mean, even in The Fog, which could easily have gone the route of over the top, or like, you're trying so hard, especially 1980, when some of that, like, new digital effects are really starting to come out.
Yeah.
I think it says a lot that he was reserved and maintained just kind of the allure. I love the fact that you never actually see or get, like, too close of a look of the ship crew. I thought that, like, if this is an accident, awesome, but this doesn't feel like an accident, and it's way more effective that you just get their silhouettes in the fog, or you just get that intense, like, lady, you are making the worst decision being stuck on the lighthouse. What the fuck are you doing? But I get what you're doing, and you got shadows coming after you. Like, that original Fog, man.
It's one of, I think, the best movies that isn't talked about enough. Like, obviously people talk about Halloween.
Yeah.
They start to talk about They Live More, which is nice because it's incredible. But nobody talks about how great The Fog is. And I definitely agree with you. I think because of those choices, it holds up so well 43 years later.
Yeah.
That you don't have digital fog, you have just smoke billowing, and it's naturally lit, and it's real silhouettes of people in the fog, and you don't know who they are or what they're doing until they try to kill you. It's just it's so, like, fog is such a thing that's so benign to normal people. Like, obviously if you're out in the ocean, it's a concern, but for normal people, it's like, the fog's coming in, like, nobody cares. It doesn't really matter.
The worst that it is, it's like, God, driving is gonna suck. But most of the time, it's like,
oh, I'll be mildly inconvenienced for a day. but then for it to actually use that as this mechanism, and the whole backstory, and the April 21st, and the whole history of the town, and it's just so well built up that by the time things start happening and the fog starts killing people, or the ship crew in the fog, I don't know. It's one of those movies that I think people definitely need to see, and it needs to be appreciated.
It was
more and
one,
more.
as a fan of the genre, I was rewatching it. I haven't seen that original Fog in years, man. I mean, like years. And I was rewatching it, and I just kept thinking, oh my God, this is this is a great movie. It's suspenseful. It's unique. And I had to chuckle because I was like, Jake and I just got done talking about on the top 10 horror of like our love for when a movie can create lore for this whole story. Let's create a mythology for this town and create all this stuff, this backstory, and that's what we're going to base this horror element off of. I think it really is such a great callback to like old, like even before film was a thing, where it was just in the storybooks and just like old folklore, spoken word and all that.
Told around a campfire.
Yeah, right. And I love that the opening scene is literally the lore being told around a campfire. Even if that was a scene added afterwards because the movie was too short and they were like, we need you to lengthen.
Gotta get to 89 minutes.
Right. Come on, man. But I was sucked into it so fast, and I felt like I was watching it for the first time because I hadn't seen it in so long. And there were definitely scenes that I totally just forgot about and was like, this is so fucking good. And I'm with you. I think more people need to revisit it or visit it in the first place because it's such a good example of the practical effects and just kind of originality. Just it's almost like a kind of a Stephen King thing where he takes like something that could be very silly, but he spins it in such a unique way that the silliness actually can be suspenseful and be kind of scary. And then some of the like what would normally be a scary moment, that's where they're going to put the silliness on. I really like, because Carpenter will do that a lot of the time. But yeah, the Fog was like, this is so good.
I think that's a very appropriate comparison. I think that there's a lot of parallel with Stephen King, and it's particularly with the Fog. I think people assume it's exactly like The Mist or very similar to The Mist. It's very different, but again also kind of has similar.
There's similar ideas
choices.
Of like a Fog or The Mist having stuff in it that's a mystery to you, that's a danger to you.
Right.
I think The Mist is definitely more depressing.
That ending. Every time.
I was excited to see Prince of Darkness because Carpenter is always considered The Thing, Prince of Darkness, and then In the Mouth of Madness is like his Apocalypse trilogy, which was the original thing that I thought we were going to be like doing.
Which I am also psyched about. You've talked about In the Mouth of Madness forever. You talked about it last time on our top 10 horror movies. You love that movie.
I really do.
I had never seen In the Mouth of Madness still, but I also never had seen Prince of Darkness, and so I was like, I love The Thing. I need to start putting together the pieces from this Apocalypse trilogy and see what it's about. So I was also very excited about Prince of Darkness.
Dude, halfway through Prince of Darkness, I was like, how is this movie not talked about like constantly for the genre? This movie
is genius.
Like, as a fan of Halloween, the kind of fan I am of Halloween, as a big of a fan as I am of In the Mouth of Madness and his other work, I could not help but think, is Prince of Darkness like his, like, is this his masterpiece? Because this movie is, I was blown away by how fucking great that movie is.
Yeah, you're not wrong. It's definitely debatable for sure. I know everybody will say The Thing is his best. It's the most praised. But I think the argument is there that Prince of Darkness, like when I say it's genius, it's not hyperbole. I genuinely was sitting there and I was like, this movie is brilliant on so many levels. Like, for it to be a movie about, I love again, I love the idea of it particularly, which is this, all of these scientists and physicists and very intelligent and very like trained people being called to this situation where they need to investigate a force, and it's a mystical or potentially malevolent spiritual force that they need to take measurements on and use their applied physics and theoretical physics and all this stuff to try to figure out. And just how they go about it and what they the data they try to collect and how it messes with them and manipulates them and interacts with them and overtakes them. It's like this, it's just such a good idea, and it's pulled off so well. And in, like, all of his other movies kind of builds up and then goes crazy. I definitely think it's among his best.
Yeah,
top 3 or 4.
I was blown away by it. Every scene, I thought right off the gate, I was like, man, the pacing in this is it's so well done. Because the whole opening with the score that he has going, just the like, he's getting you ready. He's getting you ready. And then he's still getting you ready. You're just like, Jesus Christ, what am I about to watch? And I just love that he maintains that. And I thought he did a great job of directing and writing, like the tension between some of the scientists, some of the different groups that are there, their denial or their immediate acceptance, and their kind of battle with like, oh shit, as a scientist, I'm being challenged.
Yeah.
Like basically, I love how he shows kind of he throws the whole idea of science into the scientist's face of like, you want to be proven wrong. So when you are, how are you going to respond to that? And I love that he shows some of them being very like, nope, which I think is just a great irony.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was shocked by Prince of Darkness. When it ended, I kind of was like, shame on me for not having watched this a million times before, because this is so fucking good.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's one that I will watch a lot more, mostly so I can get every single thing I could possibly get out of it.
Because I feel like there's a lot.
But also because it's...
And it was fun watching those three together, because you definitely catch little connections and just little things of like, I get why this is the Apocalypse trilogy.
Yeah.
There's like, and I guess ish spoiler, but not really, but like there's not a lot of happiness that comes out of this trilogy.
Right. There's no happy endings, at least of the two I've seen.
There's not a lot of like make you feel great about what's coming up. Like,
that's the Apocalypse for you.
I was blown away by the Prince of Darkness, and it made me kind of think, like, not just with this, but with a lot of the stuff that we've watched this year, Jake, I kind of had a realization where I was like, man, we have visited some older movies that, and I was hoping you were going to enjoy Prince of Darkness like I did, so that I could say this, where it was like, we got to watch some gems that I think really kind of, these movies are sticking with us. This is going to be, and it made me so appreciative. I was like,
and some of those are probably obvious, like Seven Samurai. But then there's ones like this that I've never heard anybody praise and say, "Oh, you'll love it." And so when I watch it, I'm like, why is nobody talking about this movie? This movie's incredible.
Like the way that he handles the supernatural aspect of it, or whatever you want to call it, because even that gets kind of challenged a little bit. I was like, this is unique. This is so different than every other way we've ever been shown or had this idea kind of approached to us. I think this is more effective to me. Like,
and I love Donald Pleasance in all of the movies that John Carpenter has made with him in it, but him as the priest in this movie and how he goes about kind of recruiting all of the scientists and interacting with them, and It's just brilliant. I love it.
Brilliant. And it brought me back to like, this feels like I'm watching Dr. Loomis like try to get the cops to realize like, you are not safe. Your town is not safe. This is a bad idea. And he does like the same thing as the priest. And I feel bad for him in both stories because no one really takes him all that serious until everything has, shit has completely hit the fan. And then everyone's like, oh,
that guy, didn't he say something about how we should be concerned?
Right. Like our bad, man. That sucks.
Yeah.
Like,
yep.
I was trying to, it's our spooky month. And for me, I typically will try to watch just nothing but horror the whole month. I called the B critics out because they did their like one horror film a day spooky month kind of thing. And I think it was Liz that I said this to her. I was like, those are amateur numbers. And she was like, what? And I was like, dude, I'm like a week in and I've already watched like 12. So
yeah.
And
yeah.
Oh, I just lost my train of thought. But so like prepping for this, seeing just straight action on here with like Assault on Precinct 13. I'm not gonna lie, I wanted to see it because I actually enjoyed the remake, but I had never seen the original. So all I knew was the remake.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I already watched Taxi Driver and The Departed, which breaks my like spooky tradition
horror streak,
but that's okay. And I was like, all right, we got another action movie. It's like, all right, I'll pop this in. Like, I was excited to watch it, but it was like, oh, okay, I'll pause on the gore and the spookiness. And then I watched Assault on Precinct 13. And this movie, dude, it had a moment that it reminded me of my Hereditary moment. And that's the fucking ice cream truck.
Oh yeah.
That happened. I'm sitting there watching it, just like, this is pretty well done so far. Like, I'm enjoying the story so far. I'm curious to see how he handles the assault. And then the ice cream truck happened. And I was like, oh, it's that kind of fucking movie. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting having it be a precursor to Halloween 2 years later.
Yeah.
That there's definitely hints at what he's going to become as a filmmaker in Assault on Precinct 13, particularly when the cops are driving around. He's like, oh, it's starting to rain. And then he's like, wait a minute, that's not rain. And he gets out and it's just some construction worker bleeding down onto the car.
Like, oh, shit.
That's a very Halloween scene right there.
Yeah. The partner in the car the whole time, like, dude, something's off. Like, I don't feel good about this. I'm telling you, something's wrong. Whatever. There ain't nothing here. Like, if there's one trope that is always a part of almost every story, it's the one guy whose intuition is on point and no one cares. Maybe we should listen to those people a little more often. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt like it had to be like a spiritual predecessor to The Purge because it kind of has the same vibes of this police station that's getting shut down, and then the police, and there's a couple of inmates left in there, and they have to like kind of join forces to survive, and suddenly like lose the rules that they've been accustomed to, and then this gang is like assaulting their precinct and trying to kill them all. And it is very kind of Night of the Living Dead-ish, where they just kind of keep coming. Come through the door and come through the windows, and they're all getting shot in the face, and it doesn't matter.
And they don't talk, they don't scream, they don't grunt. Yeah. They're silent killers. They're just there to cause mayhem. And their first scene with them like cutting their arms and pouring the blood into the bowl, I was like, this is what?
You're crazy.
Yeah, right. Like, ow, why would you do that?
Yeah.
And then immediately that thought of like, ooh, that's gross. you should not be doing that.
That's not sanitary.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh yeah, it was the
Yeah.
70s.
They all have AIDS now.
Well, they don't like cross their cuts. They were just pouring it in the bowl. But yeah.
You talked about them being a silent killer. That's the only part that like is made me like laugh and was funny, is that this guy is just outside shooting people with a silencer on his rifle, but it's all like pew pew, like like old like 70s, obviously not realistic silencer sounds. And so it did sound pretty funny the whole time, which made me happy when we get to like Escape from New York, where they actually sound realistic silencer sounds. I was like, okay, he figured it out eventually. But it's funny in Assault on Precinct thing. It's like over the top in Assault on Precinct 13.
Yeah. Well, over the top, but that was like the sound effect that they had back then. So you kind of have to give them a little grace for it.
It was the one they had in the can
right.
to use.
Like, we don't have that big of a budget. What sound effects do we have? We have this pew sound. That's it.
That's the one. We'll use it all the time. I will say Assault on Precinct 13 is the one that I definitely noticed the score immediately, because I didn't really notice it in Dark Star, but in the opening credits I was like, this is John Carpenter, and it's the synthesizer, and it's incredible, and I definitely
and it's like the whole way through. I really noticed the score on Assault. I noticed it heavily on the Prince of Darkness, and obviously, well, you didn't. I can't believe you didn't watch it. I was all excited to talk about In the Mouth of Madness with you. You didn't watch it.
He didn't write it. He wrote the guy from who wrote it? The guy from Judge Dredd 1995 wrote it. Michael DeLuca.
I know.
He only directed and composed it. So
I was still excited.
I had to get through the 9.
I know.
I'll get around to it.
But yeah, the score in this one, I was instantly like, oh, okay. Like, you just kind of, he has some of these scores where he just drops you right into it. Halloween, obviously. And then this one, what took me out, I think I noticed it more on this one because this one's such an early movie for him. I mean, he did Dark Star and then Assault. And to already kind of know, like, how he's going to score, to learn how to score that fast, to me was like, oh, this dude, you can almost tell, like, oh, he's fighting. What direction does he like more? Does he like writing and directing, or does he like scoring the film? Because they're right on par, only 2 movies into his career. That's saying
and it's so catchy, just like the Halloween thing.
Super catchy. And then I noticed after I watched it, you know, I was doing my like, oh, let's go learn stuff about the movie. I had to laugh because Assault on Precinct 13 is Hans Zimmer's like all-time favorite movie score.
Oh,
and I was like, oh, now I feel obligated to really like this, like to like it even more.
Yeah.
But I was like,
if he says it's good, I believe him.
But I felt like validated, like, okay, I wasn't just noticing it for like the sound or whatever. It genuinely is that good. Like, all right, thank you, Hans. Thank you, Hans.
Hans Zimmer's stamp of approval. I like it.
I'll take it.
I like how, obviously we talked a little bit about Halloween, but I think the Halloween score in particular is his most noteworthy, his most praised. But I just was blown away. I guess maybe I saw the whole movie with new eyes, like I was saying before, that it's to come up with everything from scratch and to for it to not be based. Like, I'm so used to Michael Myers being a thing, and for Halloween franchise to be a thing that has always been around. But I guess I appreciated the original so much more, that it's not based on anything, and it's not based on like Michael Myers was invented by John Carpenter and put on the screen and filled with such a rich backstory that is way better than everything else we had ever had to that point. Way better than Freddy, way better than Jason, way better than all of these other slasher killers that we've had. And so it's just it makes way more sense, I guess, the more you watch it and the more you see it, the more you understand it, why has stood the test of time. And he's been, even in spite of the fact of having been done so silly and so terrible sometimes, he is the foundation of what that story is strong enough to withstand all of that nonsense.
Oh yeah. Well, and you brought up the score. I was talking to my daughter about it, and I think I mentioned this a little bit in our previous episode. But I was telling her about just when you hear the Halloween theme song, I told her, like, it's instant. You just feel dread. Like, you don't feel warmth. You just feel like doom has shown up, and this is the music that's going to play with it. And that's essentially how the story is. And she was just like, really? And so I played it for her, and she was like, yeah, you don't feel great. And I was like, no, but it's catchy, but it just lingers in your head. And it's such a, like, it's so daunting that it really just kind of, to me, it helps put Michael Myers, because you see Michael's face, you hear the song. And I feel like in terms of just villain, not even horror, but just villain in general, I think when you hear that music, you see Michael's face, and he kind of set like a standard for your future villains in film are probably going to have to start somewhere here. And then you can do what you want. But to have such an effective character like that, to create such an effective character like that, he doesn't speak. He's slow for the most part, but he's so effective when he is like kind of in action, or when the violence kicks in. He doesn't mess around. He's just very one goal. Like, that's all he's got. I'm going to take a life. And he does. And my daughter asked me, like, so he just stabs everyone? That's all he does? He just stabs everyone? I was like, actually, no. Shockingly, like, Michael is associated with this giant knife, and for good reason. He does stick a kid into the wall and leaves him hanging. But I told her, like, no, he strangles people. Like, he stabs a few, but he does more strangulations than people think, or he'll just cut a throat. It's like, I think that also adds to what has helped make Michael Myers stand the test of time, because although associated with the giant knife, he's unpredictable in how he's going to actually kill his victims. And it kind of makes him even more intense, because you don't know how, you just know it's going to suck.
Right. Yeah. It's not like Jason, where all of his movies, it kind of becomes, what creative and crazy way can you come up with for them to kill people? It's more like, no, this is a guy who's just going to kill you at any cost. It's unstoppable. And whatever is around, if there's nothing around, he'll use his bare hands. He's just going to kill you.
Right. and it's intense. I've always said that's one of the things that's made Michael Myers such a, like, why he's so prominent for me, or effective for me, is because he's so different than all the other guys. He doesn't joke around with any of them. You looking at his face, he's wearing this mask that's pale and like weathered, and you don't see eyes. It's just black holes. Unless you watch, I think it's H2O, and then you do see his eyeballs.
I think it's H2O. Goofy mask.
Yeah, but it's like, that's effective. And I think that says a lot for John Carpenter, his vision of just like, how do I make a movie that's effective? How do I create this story that is going to stick with people long after they've left the theater, or long after the credits have rolled and they've moved on with their lives? How do I create a story and a character that when they go to bed at night, they kind of have that quick little, like, oh God, like, is the boogeyman
maybe
here?
I should check the closet.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've always liked that he calls Michael the boogeyman in the first movie. And I also think it's funny, if you stick around for the credits, John Carpenter named him the Shape. Like Michael was the character name, but he's the Shape, according to the credits and according to everything else, because he's just...
That's interesting.
Yeah, because Carpenter didn't want him to be definitively human or definitively superhuman or, you know, supernatural or whatever. It was very much left up so that you as the audience, like, make up your own mind, and whatever scares you the most, like, that's probably what it's going to be.
He's kind of just there. Yeah, that's interesting. I saw that he had based Michael Myers on the character on a 13-year-old boy he saw at a mental institution when he was on like a school trip, and it's kind of always stuck with him of what that must be like to be a kid and be in a mental institution. What happens if you grow up there and go on to become an
kind
adult?
Of put you there? What was like? Because obviously, especially back then, I mean, that would be like the 1950s. Late 50s, early 60s kind of time frame, where those facilities were not the best.
No, they were very scary in their own right.
Yeah, they weren't necessarily there to actually help rehabilitate or there to actually help. They were treated more as like incarceration, keep these people away from the general public because we're not sure what's actually going on with them. So
at best, at worst, they were also then experimenting on you and abusing you, and like any other facility.
So I think first off, what fucked up school did John Carpenter go to where they thought, like, you know, it would be a good outing for our students? Let's go to a mental facility where we can look at the patients like they're monkeys in a zoo.
Right. Like, it's don't do this, kids.
Right. And that's back then. So it was like, if you skip a day at church, you know, we might have to send you into the house because you might be possessed. Well, no, that would have been more 80s. So
you might go to the sanatorium for sure. Locked up.
But yeah, for him to kind of like have that influence kind of linger and stick that long enough for him to create this, you know, what would become Michael Myers, I guess I feel a little jealous. Like you kind of, you know what I mean? Like, man,
like, how many things have I seen in my life that could have inspired me to come up with something interesting?
And I just the next iconic thing. But
instead I was like, oh, that's weird. And I went on with my life.
Right. But I think that may have actually kind of been the point, is I don't think he set out to make an iconic thing. I think he just set out, he had an idea. Yeah. He had a specific vision for it. He managed to get it done.
Just want to tell an interesting story.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, Michael Myers is everywhere. It's 2023. And I think even had we not had the requels over the last few years, I think Michael would still be, because I remember his face was still everywhere. Even after all the joke, you know, the silly sequels in the 90s came out.
H2O, yeah.
Michael somehow survives that and is still viewed as like terrifying.
Right. Right. Yeah. And that character and that fear will last forever. It will last past John Carpenter's life. It will last past our lives. Like that, he just made more than one iconic movie, which is incredible.
And I think it's funny, you know, a lot of focus is put on Michael Myers. I think he's the most commercialized of Carpenter's creations.
That's true.
But you do have to give a lot of credit to The Thing, even though it's a remake. But it is a shapeless, faceless, you never know what it actually looks like.
Yeah.
But The Thing, I'm always torn because I always view The Thing as sci-fi, and then I watch it and then I'm like, no, this is horror. Like this is a straight horror film. And for some reason, every time I watch it, I'm like, I'm not in the mood for sci-fi. And then it's like as soon as you hear or see the shot of the dog Ryan being shot at, and they're like, "Kill the dog! It's the dog! It's the dog!" I'm like, "Oh no, this is horror.
Yeah.
There's nothing good that comes out of this one."
Absolutely.
But I think the thing is, I don't know. I feel like it's also kind of underappreciated these days.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I rewatched it when I did the Apocalypse trilogy, when it ended, I was just kind of sitting there for a second and just letting it soak in. Kind of like what you did with Halloween, where it was like watching it with fresh eyes. You know, I've seen The Thing a million times. I know the movie well. I love the movie. But watching it this time around was very like trying to pay attention to just like the growth in Carpenter's style, his writing, directing, all that, and the music. Like, The Thing is really just, I mean, it's an intense movie. And it's kind of like, you kind of can't help but feel a little claustrophobic watching it. I know that's kind of ironic to say because it's out in Antarctica and
the middle of nowhere,
right?
Wide open spaces.
But I think that's what makes it feel claustrophobic because there's nothing around them to help them out.
And it's also so desolate and dangerous. You like the elements.
The elements are
You need to be in this tiny little like structure that will let you survive in this place.
And if you venture out,
a different planet essentially.
Yeah, and if you venture out, you have to have the like lifeline that you have to be hooked to just in case the winds are blowing too hard and you can't. You know, it's white out. I was like, man.
Yeah, so you're trapped in the structure with nowhere to go as this thing is
imitating people. You have no clue where it is, who it is, what.
Yeah.
The mystery of it all. I really appreciate how Carpenter wrote his characters to just have that kind of fight or that disbelief when they realize like, oh, I think this is alien. But kind of just being like, the proof is literally right in front of us. We just torched some of it. So we're fighting an alien, guys, and it can replicate us. So fuck all of you. We're gonna
right.
Yeah.
We need a safe word.
Right. Yeah, I think The Thing is also, I think it might be one of Kurt Russell's best. He's so good in that movie.
He's made a lot of good ones though, but that's definitely one of his best.
It's one of his best. And it's funny watching him in The Thing, and then you watch like Big Trouble in Little China. You're just like, this makes me respect Kurt Russell even more. And even Carpenter had a quote about working with Russell, or just Kurt Russell in general, of like he respects him so much because he takes roles based on what he thinks is just going to be enjoyable, what he likes. He doesn't care about the peer pressure from a studio. He doesn't care about, you know, really anything else being liked all the time. He takes it because he's like, this seems interesting and fun to me, so I'm going to do it. I'm like, man, I really love it when I hear actors that do that. You know, Keanu Reeves is very well known to do that. He doesn't care. He's like, I'm going to do what I feel like. And they make interesting films. But yeah, I feel like The Thing has a lot of like stature to it, but I feel it's kind of gotten like lost a little bit. I don't know. Maybe it's just newer generations that don't want to watch old films.
Yeah.
What a shame, because they're missing out on just incredible storytelling.
Yeah, The Thing is better than pretty much everything that came out this year. So if you're going to watch a movie, just go watch The Thing.
Yeah, I want to argue you, but I mean, that's a valid argument.
Yep. Fight me. I dare you.
I
definitely see that with Kurt Russell, though, that you can tell in Escape from New York, particularly, which is such an over-the-top character for Kurt Russell to play Snake Plissken. And he's got the eye patch, he's got the gravelly voice, and he's got a funny name, Snake. He's just such a, I don't know, like it's very clear that he was going for kind of a iconic action hero, anti-hero look, and pulls it off. but it takes a lot of commitment from Kurt Russell to not be like, this is kind of silly.
I think it takes a lot of commitment from like everyone a part of that movie. I like the idea because Kurt Russell, he's kind of a conundrum to me, because growing up, I felt like Kurt Russell was also part of the like echelon of the big guys like Arnold and Sly. But really looking back at it, you're like, oh, he wasn't. He was just,
he didn't do that much.
He didn't do like the big muscle man movies. So it is funny watching Escape from New York and him. I really think they were creating like, they have their big muscle dudes. We're gonna have our anti-hero kind of futuristic-y, super bizarre kind of dude, and your name is Snake.
Yeah,
and you're wearing an eye patch.
Yeah. It really gets into what I love about 80s sci-fi movies. It's apocalyptic premise, and it's set in the future, but all the computers are super old and shitty graphics. And it always cracks me up, like all of the different, it's obviously low budget design choices with the like rifles and everything that they've got. It's just kind of cobbled together to make this world, but it works because like the world is kind of falling apart. It makes a lot of sense that when they throws them into New York and the whole city is basically a prison, there's a lot of really fun, I don't know, like nods to things. I don't feel like Escape to LA did this as much, where it has like tongue-in-cheek nods or design decisions. There's a part where Snake just is going down the street and dudes are popping up out of the sewers, and he goes into a diner, and like the sign on the diner says chock full of nuts, and that's what the city is. It's just chock full of crazy people trying to kill him. So I just appreciate that it's just, he gets kind of what it's going for and puts it out there, and whether people like it or not doesn't really matter.
Right. It really reminded me, that kind of principle of just like, we know what we're going for. We understand the absurdity. We understand just the ridiculousness and all that. If people like it, awesome. If they don't, it's their loss. And Carpenter's kind of had like, well, he's had success with this mentality, I think, even though he says he takes failures of his movies really hard. And I get that. But he's had a lot of success. But that kind of principle of like just leaning into the absurdity brings me to like, or reminds me of Big Trouble in Little China, where it's such a bizarre, like, what are we doing? But at the same time, you're like, I am all in, because this is fantastic.
Yeah, exactly.
And
it's not bad at all.
Same thing with like They Live, where you're just like, this is silly. I mean, we're chewing bubblegum and kicking ass. All right, what a cheeseball line. We got to have these special sunglasses. Okay, whatever. But then you watch it and you're like, this is just so good. Like, sometimes leaning into the absurdity is such a strength. And I think Carpenter constantly just like throwing this down with so many of his films is just one of the many reasons he's like this godfather to me of just horror. But that's the thing, it's not just horror. The dude does all of these so well.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah, I think leaning into the absurdity has led to a lot of success, and I think has also led to a lot of unexpected iconic imagery, whether it's how the fog looks. If you're like, oh, there's going to be just like these dudes in the fog and they're going to kill people, you're like, well, that's going to look dumb on screen, but it works really, really well. Or if you have Michael Myers, you're like, well, there's a guy and he wears a jumpsuit and a mask and he stabs people. You're like, what's scary about that? But then you actually see it and you're like, he's like everybody in a mask and he's really scary. And then Snake is over the top, but he completely works. And They Live, I think, has to be the best example of like, it is over the top.
Mhm.
It is bizarre, that not just the way the aliens look, but the sunglasses and the way that when you wear the sunglasses, you see through the advertising onto what it's really trying to tell you. That style and just the stills from that movie are the most like iconic and just grabbing you, like, oh, what is that? That's interesting looking.
Right.
I really need to find out what that is. And you wouldn't have had that if you played it conventional, I guess. If you made a conventional movie about aliens taking over the world and trying to control people, you wouldn't have the iconic or the look that grabs people so well.
Yeah, he's achieved this all without really trying to be like this master filmmaker, this genius behind the camera or behind the script or behind the keyboard or the synthesizer. He's made his ideas. He's had his ideas. He's either like co-written it or like have people help him out with it, or he's just done it all on his own. But it comes back to what we talked about earlier in this episode, just the simplicity. Yeah, the absurdity can seem crazy or whatever, but the simplicity is so perfect and necessary for his stories. You know, with They Live, him having the big reveal of like the real world, and it's a pair of sunglasses. Like, I think, I would imagine when the studios read this, even when it came out, they were probably like, are you kidding? Like, there's got to be something else. And he's like, no, sunglasses. But like, just this kind of sunglasses is going to be the one. Yeah. But then you watch it and you're like, it makes sense. It fits this world. It's so much better. Like, it's such an easy, because sunglasses are always going to be there. We expect them to kind of protect our eyes. And so for them to be, you know, the big revealers, I like the simplicity of these ideas. As someone who's like always had this kind of thought of like, how cool would it be to write such a great script? I think, and I'm sure writers out there can relate. You get sucked up so quickly in trying to perfect the idea, trying to perfect the way you wrote it, trying to perfect every little thing you're doing. And I feel like, man, I think more writers or directors, whatever, should kind of take note from Carpenter. And sure, I'm a huge fan of his. Yeah, I'm going to be in his corner. But you look at those early films, you know, the 70s through the 90s, and it's like, the dude did it. He'd probably be a good one to take note from. And I think the first one is, don't try to be perfect, because at no point in a lot of his movies does he ever, you can tell he's not going for perfection. He's going for, what do I think, you know, you said it earlier of like, what scares me that's probably going to be effective. And it's like, to him, it's also, oh, you know, I'm sure it's more of like, or another level of just what's interesting to me. I think I'm just going to write what I think is interesting, and we'll see how it translates. I think that's an important note to take. And Carpenter, the dude deserves so much more respect from like mainstream audiences, because damn.
Yeah, I think he's a great inspiration to up and coming filmmakers, I think, or he ought to be, because I think you nailed it. One thing that I wrote down, and as I was watching it, I was like, he's not one of those like great super stylized auteurs. He's not Scorsese, he's not Fincher, he's not Nolan. He does his own thing, and he's kind of a jack of all trades, master of none kind of guy. Like, he's not an incredibly like stylized director. He's not like an overly complicated storyteller, and his music even is not like huge symphonies and conducting and all this stuff.
Like an electric guitar and a synthesizer.
Yeah, I get the impression that it's a guy in the garage with a keyboard doing all the sounds on the keyboard. He's got the drums on the keyboard, he's got the synthesizer sounds, the horn sounds, like he's doing it all, but he's doing, like you said, not perfectly. He's doing it good enough to get the idea across and the story across, and it comes out great most of the time, and it makes some of the best and most iconic stories of all time. And so I think that is a huge thing to take away from him and his legacy, and what he's given to us is these stories that we love so much, but also that it's kind of makes the medium more accessible, that you could write a story. If you see some kid at an insane asylum on your school trip, write a story about it. Or if you just see something in everyday life like sunglasses, what happens if you put these sunglasses on? Like, just start doing those kinds of exercises and you can come up with something like this.
And like,
it's all there.
Be okay with the weird, be okay with the absurd, or even, you know, as most people probably say, like the stupid idea is almost like Carpenter is taking that and throwing it right back in the faces of those critics, you know, that kind of criticism, being like, you called it stupid, but now it's this juggernaut. So
yeah, then it scared me and made me poop my pants, and I actually am going to be a little concerned when I go to bed tonight.
Yeah, I just like prepping for this, dude. I was really, and even when I thought that it was just that Apocalypse trilogy, just rewatching stuff and just like kind of learning about Carpenter. And I mean, the dude went to was it the Southern California School of Cinema or whatever, but he dropped out.
Yeah,
like he dropped out because he realized, like, I can make my own film. And I like the idea that he did it and was like, I don't have to do it to appease, you know, these professors who think they're going to, who think they're the masterminds. No offense to those guys, but like, where's your movie? Which I guess some people say, you could say that to anyone who judges a film, and it's valid. But I respect that he took a shot.
Yeah,
you know. And that's a big gamble.
Yeah,
even back then, that's a huge fucking gamble.
Oh, absolutely.
And I mean, obviously it worked out for him. Even with his commercial failures, he's, to me, he's like, it's like the Alice in Chains and Nirvana kind of thing, where Nirvana has all the credit, they get all the attention. You know, no offense, Wes Craven, no offense, Nirvana. Love both of your stuff. But then like with grunge and stuff, you look at Alice in Chains and you find out they've had the much bigger influence on a much wider scale. They just didn't have the attention. I feel like that's the case with Carpenter. But with so many other directors and filmmakers or storytellers, he's just kind of been, like, I think, taken for granted.
Yeah, kind of quietly doing his own thing for 40 years.
Right. And I mean, you revisit his stuff like we did, and it's like, this is just, I feel like he's outdoing so many people these days, you know? Like when I watched Prince of Darkness, I was like, this just shot like half of the movies I've seen in the last couple of years. Just like, that was cute. Watch this.
Right. Yeah, particularly when it comes to new horror.
Yeah, I feel it's a shame that he's like underrated, in my opinion, that he deserves way more credit than what he's been given. And he's been given a lot. I will say that. Like, people have been coming around, but I think it's just kind of been, I think he's been, him as a storyteller has been lost kind of to the movies. People know his movies, but they don't know the man behind it. And it's like, you really need to look at this man behind it, because he deserves our thanks. As movie fans, like, a lot of gratitude towards that guy.
Yeah, and I feel like even though people know the name and they know the iconic ones, there's always seems to be this stigma of, well, they're just cute, low budget, you know, basically B movie, whether it's horror or sci-fi or whatever. that they just don't get that appreciation for. No, they're sincerely really good movies with really good ideas and stories that will stick with you for the rest of your life, and they're worth checking out.
Yeah, it was just, coming out of October, I usually will take a big break from watching really anything that's like intense or horror or spooky. And obviously we have a lot of like interesting things that we'll be prepping for coming up pretty soon. But I definitely found myself like, especially Prince of Darkness and that original Assault on Precinct, of just kind of being, and The Fog, and just being like, man, I feel like I owe it to these movies to just like kind of rewatch a whole bunch of times all back to back and just kind of like,
yeah.
I'm still like, I can't believe it's taken me this long to see Prince of Darkness. That was so, God, I can't get over that movie, dude. It was so good. And then The Fog, I was like, how the fuck did I watch this movie when I was so like way back in the day and shrugged it as kind of like, okay, it was fun. I'm like, how did that? I must not have been paying attention to it. Like,
I literally took out my phone, put in my calendar April 21st, The Fog Day, and I'm like, I need to watch this movie every year on April 21st from now on.
All right. We're making it official right here. Movie Boners, calendar day, April 21st, Fog Day.
Fog Day.
Fog Day. We watch and celebrate and enjoy The Fog. Dude, we really need to do that.
Yeah,
we really need to do that. That needs to be a thing. Yeah, I'm writing that down.
Yeah, I'm glad that that's all we get out of this. That's more than enough. But yeah, sincerely watch The Fog and whatever that one was, Prince of Darkness.
Prince of Darkness.
If you need a good Halloween movie in the next couple of days, which I'm sure you will, The Fog and Prince of Darkness will do the job.
Yeah.
And you probably haven't seen them.
I know, which is a shame. Or you think that you've seen The Fog and you're probably like, isn't that really shitty one that came out in like 2006 or whatever? Don't watch the remake.
Well, that too.
Don't watch that one. Just watch the
original from 1980.
Watch the original. Yeah. Well, did you have any? I feel like we've kind of.
I don't think so. I think we covered it. Thank you, John Carpenter. We love you and appreciate you.
And the dude's made so many more movies. I mean, just go and check out his whole filmography, guys. He's made so many freaking movies. That was one thing that kind of took me off guard. I was like, this guy has made constantly working. And I think it's cool that even with a few of his duds, they're still fun to watch. Like Vampires, not the best vampire movie ever made, but it's still super entertaining to watch James Woods go and shoot down vampires, and he's all like gruff, wearing the leather and the boots.
Yeah, of course. I was shocked just this year. I learned that he directed a movie that I loved when I was a kid, Memoirs of an Invisible Man.
Oh, yeah.
With Chevy Chase.
Yeah.
And I was like, no way did John Carpenter direct that, but he absolutely did.
Yeah, he really did. Did you see he had the opportunity to direct Top Gun, but turned that one down? I thought, man,
no,
a John Carpenter led Top Gun. That would have been weird.
Why? Yeah, that would have been weird for sure.
But yeah,
interesting.
So much gratitude towards John Carpenter. It was like enlightening and humbling for me to just realize, like, man, I've been underestimating this genius for far too long.
Yeah.
I really think, I was also thinking at one point, because I got asked recently of like favorite directors, which might be an idea for farther down the line.
Yeah.
And after prepping for this one and thinking about that question, he's never even been part of that thought to me. But I was really like, oh, he's got I mean, this isn't even an underdog fight. This is like he has a prominent fight for like a top 10 director kind of thing. That's just realizing how much I love of his stuff. So thank you, John Carpenter.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hopefully this inspires you to check out more of his stuff and let that appreciation grow as well, because I think it's well deserved.
Very well deserved. Yeah. Well, guys, I guess coming up, I know we mentioned it at the start of the episode. We've got quite the doozy coming up.
Yeah, if you're like me and you've never seen Requiem for a Dream, the Darren Aronofsky joyful fest film, I don't know what you would call it. A doozy, that's probably the way to put it. Yep. If you've never seen that doozy from Darren Aronofsky, you should, because we're going to get into spoilers next episode, and I'm sure it will be interesting. I still have not seen it, so don't spoil it for me either, because
I can
want to go fresh, and I'm very excited.
Yeah, and I can tell you, because I've already, even without the rewatch yet, or the couple rewatches that I normally do, I've already started my notes. And Jake, I should warn you, I have a lot already.
To say, okay, yeah. It's gonna be some rants, maybe.
Huh?
Are we lucky enough?
What?
Are we lucky enough to hear some rants? Maybe.
I wouldn't say rants. There might be some social commentary that I've got coming your way. I've got some
rants.
Yeah, a little bit. But it's all for. We'll get there. I'm excited for this one, Jake. Okay. I know you've had to hear me like mention this movie a lot, or as you like to say, advocate for this movie.
Yeah,
I will always advocate for this movie. I think it's important. I'm excited to dive into it. Granted, you don't feel good watching it, but it's important, I feel. So I'm excited to go into that one. And I am excited to follow it up with our comedies. That's going to be quite the shift. But
yeah. Quite the shift, but also one that I'm most anticipatory of, because I've always disliked how I went about our top 10 comedies in the very beginning. I kind of made a weird choice that I didn't make with any other list. And so I get to do it again, redo it.
Yeah.
And it's going to be very different, a lot better.
I'm excited for mine too, because a few of my original picks have been put on other lists now. So as my own like kind of rule for myself that I'm trying to abide by, they are no longer going to be featured on my comedy list. So I'm a little curious to see how I'm approaching this one. Like you, there were a couple decisions I made for that original recording where I was like, what the fuck? Why did you put that one and not this one? What are you thinking?
Yeah.
And
yeah,
I'm excited for it. I'm excited for the rest of this year. We've got some great great stuff to talk about. It'll be a feel good end of year.
Yeah,
it really will. It should be fun.
Yeah, I'm excited. All right,
that's
so
it.
I think that's all we got.
Make sure you follow, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. All that jazz. That was lame.
Yeah, it helps us out a lot.
Yeah. Go buy some swag and all that good stuff, and we appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah, and check out our guest episodes for if you want more stuff until the next episode.
Yeah. All right, guys.
All right. See you guys later.
Bye.